There's a certain kind of confidence that echoes before a person even speaks. It fills the air. It demands attention. It wants to be seen. And then there is another kind of strength. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that waits. That afternoon, the gym was louder than usual. Metal plates clanged against steel bars. Sneakers squeaked across the rubber floor. Music pulsed from overhead speakers thick with bass and bravado. Mirrors lined the walls, reflecting flexed arms, tightened cores, and faces locked in competition. At the center of it all stood two men who clearly believed the room belonged to them. They were built like statues carved out of effort and ego. Broad shoulders, thick arms, veins that seemed to pulse with pride more than blood. Every movement they made was deliberate, designed to be watched, and they were being watched. A few steps away, near the dumbbell rack, two young women stood observing. One of them, Damaris, had the kind of presence that naturally drew attention without trying. Calm eyes, composed posture. She wasn't impressed easily. The two muscular men noticed. "Oh, one of them grunted theatrically as he racked an impossibly heavy barbell. "I can assure you both," he declared loudly, glancing toward the women, "that I'll beat anyone in this place." The other laughed. "We're the strongest men here, no question." Their voices carried, not just to the women, to everyone, including the skinny guy near the corner bench. He wasn't hard to overlook. Narrow shoulders, long limbs, a plain t-shirt slightly too loose around his frame. He wasn't posing. He wasn't flexing. He wasn't even looking at anyone. He was quietly adjusting the weights on his bar, and that alone seemed to irritate them. "What's wrong?" One of the muscular men smirked as he walked past. "You hurt yourself, weakling?" A few nearby gym-goers chuckled under their breath. The skinny guy paused for half a second, not in anger, not in embarrassment, just awareness. He looked up briefly, then returned to his workout without a word. That silence only fueled the mockery. "Don't bother the rookie," the second man added, loud enough for the women to hear. "If it bothers you that much, go comfort him." More laughter, but something shifted in the room at that moment. Not loudly, subtly. Because near the far end of the weight rack, seated on a small bench beneath a faded motivational poster, was an older man. Gray hair, calm expression, observant eyes that missed nothing. He had been listening, he had been watching, and unlike the others, he wasn't entertained. "You two have your egos through the roof," the older man said quietly. The words weren't shouted, but they landed. The muscular men turned. "Excuse me?" one of them scoffed. "Old man, this is a strength tournament environment. You're a little out of place." A few people shifted uncomfortably. The older man stood slowly. "Arrogance," he replied evenly, "is the great flaw of your generation." The words weren't hostile. They were measured. That made them heavier. The two men laughed. "There's no comparison between youth and old age anymore," one said dismissively. "Not even with all the experience in the world are you going to beat us." The older man didn't react emotionally. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he glanced briefly toward the skinny guy, then back at the barbell resting on the rack. "Very well," he said calmly. "Then perhaps we should make this interesting." The gym grew quieter, not silent, but attentive, because sometimes the loudest men in the room are not the strongest, and sometimes the biggest mistake you can make is underestimating the wrong person. There is a strange thing about public pride. Once it's displayed, it demands protection, and once it's challenged, it refuses to retreat. The two muscular men didn't just laugh at the older man's words, they felt threatened by them. "Make it interesting?" one of them repeated, stepping closer. "Sir, I'm not going to waste my time with you." The older man tilted his head slightly, not offended, not defensive. "I wouldn't waste your time," he said calmly. "I would test it." A few people nearby stopped pretending not to listen. The skinny guy in the corner remained quiet, but his attention had shifted. He wasn't adjusting weights anymore. He was watching. "Sir," one of the women asked gently, "are you really sure you can beat them?" The question wasn't mocking. It was cautious. The older man smiled faintly. "They use the strength of their youth every day," he said, "but they don't use this." He tapped the side of his temple. The gym atmosphere changed. Not explosive, just charged. "Listen," one of the muscular men interrupted loudly. "This isn't a retirement home competition. This is real strength." "And strength without thought," the older man replied, "is incomplete." That line landed harder than expected. Now the room was fully watching. One of the muscular men leaned toward Damaris with a confident grin. "Just imagine walking next to a muscular guy like me," he said. "You'd move up in status." Damaris didn't smile. "I'm not just anyone," she replied calmly, "and you're starting to lose points." A small ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. Ego doesn't like being embarrassed, so it escalates. "Fine," the second muscular man said sharply. "You want a challenge? Let's make one." The older man nodded slowly. "Let's." "What are we betting?" one of them asked. The skinny guy stepped forward slightly for the first time. "We'll bet something valuable," he said, his voice steady. The muscular men looked him up and down. "You?" one of them laughed. "What exactly do you have to offer?" The skinny guy hesitated for half a second. Then he pulled his phone from his pocket. "And $40, he added. The crowd murmured. "For $40? One of the muscular men scoffed. "I'm not wasting my time." "Or," the older man interjected smoothly, "are you afraid?" That word hung in the air. Afraid. The two muscular men straightened. "Us? Afraid?" one snapped. "Not in 1,000 years." "Then accept," the older man said calmly, "unless pride is louder than courage." That was it. The trap had been set. Damaris crossed her arms thoughtfully. "If you beat them," she said slowly, looking at the skinny guy and the older man, "I'll go out with you." Her friend nodded. "Same here." Now the stakes had shifted. Money was small. Ego was huge. But status, that was priceless. "You don't decide for me," Damaris added firmly when one of the muscular men tried to interrupt. "If they win, I'll honor it." Silence. Then, "We accept," the muscular men said, almost in unison. "But just so you know your place," one added, pointing at the older man, "an old man with one foot in the grave and a skinny, undernourished guy are no match for us." The skinny guy didn't react. The older man didn't blink. He simply walked toward the barbell. "Let's calculate," he murmured quietly, almost to himself. 45 pounds, 70, 115. He began adding plates with calm precision. The muscular men exchanged amused glances. "You can't be serious," one of them said. "Oh, I'm very serious," the older man replied. He finished stacking the plates. The bar bent slightly under the weight. The room felt heavier. The older man stepped back. "Who lifts first?" one of the muscular men asked smugly. The skinny guy stepped forward. And for the first time that afternoon, he was no longer invisible. Confidence is easy when you believe you're untouchable. It's louder when you think no one can challenge you. But the moment someone quiet steps forward, confidence begins to feel different. It feels tested. The skinny guy walked toward the bar, not rushed, not dramatic, just steady. The two muscular men smirked. "You sure about this?" one of them asked loudly. "That's not beginner weight." The skinny guy didn't answer. He bent down, adjusted his grip, rolled his shoulders back slightly. The gym had gone quiet in a way it hadn't before, not because they respected him, but because they expected him to fail. "Don't let them laugh at you," one of the women whispered. He inhaled slowly. Then he pulled. The bar didn't fly up. It didn't jerk violently. It moved deliberately, controlled. measured, up past his knees, up to his waist. He locked his back, straightened fully, held it. Silence. A different kind of silence. Not amused, not dismissive, impressed. The plates trembled slightly in his hands. His arms weren't huge. His frame wasn't thick, but his posture was stable, and he wasn't shaking. He lowered the weight carefully back down. No theatrics, no roaring, just precision. The two muscular men stared. "That's not possible," one muttered. "Beginner's luck," the other added quickly. "But luck doesn't repeat controlled form." The skinny guy stepped back, still calm, still not smiling. One of the men narrowed his eyes. "You train powerlifting, don't you?" The skinny guy gave a small nod. "Yes." The word wasn't boastful, it was factual. A murmur spread through the gym. The ego in the room had shifted slightly. The two muscular men were still strong, still impressive, but now they weren't alone in that category. "Fine," one of them said, trying to recover control. "You lifted it. So what? That doesn't mean you're stronger." "Strength isn't noise," the older man said quietly from behind them. "It's discipline." The muscular men turned toward him again. "This isn't over," one snapped. "You're right," the older man replied calmly. "It isn't." One of the men suddenly grinned. "You know what? Let's change the rules." The crowd reacted immediately. "That wasn't the deal," someone said. "It is now," the muscular man continued. "If he can lift that weight, then both of them have to lift it." He pointed at the older man. "And he has to do it too." The room stirred again. The skinny guy glanced at the older man. The older man didn't look worried. "Fair," he said. The muscular men exchanged looks of satisfaction. Now it felt safer to them. The skinny guy had surprised them. But the old man, that was different. Age was visible. Wrinkles were visible. Gray hair was visible. In their minds, this was balance restored. "Let's see if experience helps you now," one of them said mockingly. The older man stepped forward slowly, but before he touched the bar, he studied it, not casually, carefully. He crouched down slightly, eyes scanning the plates. The skinny guy noticed, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, because something the muscular men didn't understand was happening. They had been using muscle all afternoon, but the older man, he was using something else. The crowd leaned in. The ego in the room had cracked, but it hadn't collapsed yet. And the biggest lesson of the day was still coming. There's a difference between lifting weight and understanding it. The older man didn't grab the bar immediately. He didn't roll his shoulders. He didn't stretch. He simply crouched beside the rack and examined the plates like a professor reviewing a diagram. The two muscular men laughed. "What are you doing?" one asked. "Praying?" The older man ignored him. Instead, he turned slightly toward the skinny guy. "Jose Daniel," he said calmly. The name caught the room's attention. "Yes, sir?" "Please remove the plates from the left side. Leave only one plate on the right." A ripple of confusion spread instantly. "That wasn't the deal," one of the muscular men protested. "It is now," the older man replied evenly. "Or are you afraid?" The word again. Afraid. They hated that word. "Fine," one snapped. "Do whatever trick you're planning." Jose Daniel adjusted the bar as instructed. One side now carried weight. The other side was nearly bare. The bar tilted slightly in the rack. The muscular men crossed their arms, amused. "You really think you can lift that with one hand?" one scoffed. "Not even 5 men could do that." The older man stood slowly. "I won't need 5, he said. He stepped beside the loaded side of the bar, placed one hand firmly beneath the weighted end, adjusted his footing, and paused. The pause was intentional. He let the room lean forward. He let doubt grow. He let ego feel safe again. "Watch and learn," he said quietly. Then he lifted. The weighted side rose, not explosively, not violently, but smoothly. The opposite end dipped downward toward the floor as physics dictated. The bar rotated slightly in the rack, and within seconds, the heavy side was elevated in the air. One hand, stable, controlled. Gasps broke through the gym. The two muscular men stared in disbelief. "That's impossible," one muttered. The older man lowered the bar gently back into place, then turned. "You see," he said calmly, "you only use strength." He tapped the bar lightly. "You don't use your heads." Silence. The crowd processed what had just happened. The bar hadn't been lifted evenly. It had been leveraged. Torque, balance, center of mass. The older man had changed the equation, not the weight, the equation. "I applied a mathematical formula," he continued. "Force multiplied by distance. Leverage reduces required output." The muscular men looked around as if someone might defend them. No one did. "You tricked us," one finally said. "No," the older man replied. "I educated you." The statement landed harder than any insult, because it wasn't emotional, it was factual. Jose Daniel stepped forward slightly. "I told you," he said quietly. "Brute force isn't everything." The older man looked at the two muscular men directly now. "Intelligence," he said, "will always defeat arrogance in the long run." For the first time that afternoon, the loudest men in the room had nothing to say. The women exchanged glances. Damaris' expression had changed completely. Not amused, not entertained, impressed, but not by muscle, by composure, by strategy, by restraint. "Who's going to kiss the biceps now?" the older man asked gently. There was no mockery in his tone, just a reminder of the agreement. One of the muscular men stepped forward angrily. "Cheater." The older man raised an eyebrow. "Was it illegal?" Silence. "No," he answered himself. "It was intelligent." The room felt different now. Not loud, not competitive, balanced. The two muscular men weren't weak. They weren't incapable. But they had just discovered something uncomfortable. Strength without thought is fragile. Ego without awareness collapses quickly. And sometimes, the person you laugh at first is the one teaching the final lesson. There's a moment after humiliation, a split second when a person has two choices: accept it or react. The two muscular men chose reaction. "Cheater," one of them repeated, louder this time. "That was a trick." The older man didn't move. "Knowledge is not a trick," he replied. "It's preparation." "That wasn't real strength." "Neither is shouting," the older man answered calmly. A few people in the crowd nodded subtly. The air had shifted completely now. Earlier, the two men owned the room. Now they were standing in it. Very different feeling. One of them suddenly stepped toward Damaris. "Come on," he said sharply. "You're not seriously going to leave with them." His voice carried a hint of desperation now, not dominance. Damaris didn't step back, but Jose Daniel did step forward. Not aggressively, just enough. "Don't get close to her," he said quietly. The muscular man squared his shoulders. "What are you going to do?" Jose Daniel held his gaze. "Take another step," he said evenly, "and you'll find out who I am." There was no yelling, no threats, just calm certainty, and strangely, that felt heavier than muscle. The older man placed a gentle hand on Jose Daniel's shoulder. "That's enough," he said. Then he turned back to the two men. "You lost." Not angrily, not mockingly, just clearly. "Brute force never beats intelligence," he continued. "Not in the long run. Strategy, discipline, humility, those are lasting strengths." One of the muscular men looked around as if searching for support. There was none, because deep down, everyone had seen it. They hadn't lost because they were weak. They had lost because they were arrogant. "I'm not accepting anything," one muttered. "That's your choice," the older man replied. "But denial doesn't change reality." Damaris stepped forward now. "You said earlier that walking next to you would raise my status," she said calmly. The man didn't respond. "My status doesn't rise because of muscles," she continued. "It rises because of character." That line stung more than the defeat. Her friend nodded. "I don't go out with sore losers." The two muscular men looked smaller now, not physically, but emotionally. Earlier, they had demanded admiration. Now they couldn't even hold eye contact. Jose Daniel picked up his phone from the bench where he had placed it before the lift. "No hard feelings," he said, and the way he said it made it clear. There weren't any. Because the lesson wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about humiliation. It was about perspective. The older man gave a slight bow of his head toward the two men. "I sincerely hope," he said gently, "that next time you measure someone's worth, you look deeper." Silence followed, not awkward, reflective. The two muscular men said nothing more. There was nothing left to defend, because the loudest men in the room had just learned something uncomfortable. Strength impresses people, intelligence humbles them, and humility earns respect. "Shall we?" Damaris said softly. Jose Daniel nodded. The older man smiled faintly, and together, they walked toward the exit, leaving behind more than a competition. They left behind a lesson. Outside the gym, the air felt cooler, quieter. The noise of clanging metal and bruised egos faded behind them as the doors closed. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then Damaris turned toward the older man. "How did you know?" she asked. He adjusted his jacket slightly, as if the question had been expected all along. "Know what?" he replied gently. "That they would underestimate you." A faint smile appeared on his face, because most people do. There was no bitterness in his tone, only truth. Jose Daniel looked at him with curiosity now, not just respect. "You calculated that weight in your head," he said. "You knew exactly how to shift the balance." The older man nodded. "For several years," he explained, "I taught high school physics." Damaris' eyes widened slightly. "And on weekends," he continued, "I trained powerlifting, not for competition, for discipline." Jose Daniel couldn't help but laugh softly. "So you've been waiting for a moment like that?" The older man shook his head. "No, I've been preparing for life." They paused near the sidewalk. Cars passed. Evening light stretched long shadows across the pavement. "What you saw in there," the older man continued, "wasn't about muscle. It wasn't about embarrassing anyone." He looked back toward the gym doors briefly. It was about demonstrating something they were unwilling to learn. "And what was that?" Damaris asked. "That intelligence multiplies strength," he said, "but ego divides it." Jose Daniel absorbed the words carefully. "You knew they'd change the rules," he added. "Of course," the older man replied. "People who rely only on power always move the goalposts when they feel threatened." Damaris smiled slightly. "You handled it calmly." "Calmness," he said, "is the greatest advantage in any competition." There was something grounding about him. Not flashy, not dramatic, just steady. "You really lifted that weight with one hand," Jose Daniel said, still slightly amazed. "Yes," the older man answered, "but not because I'm stronger." He looked directly at him now. "Because I understood leverage." He tapped his temple again lightly. "Life works the same way." They stood in thoughtful silence for a moment. Inside the gym, the two muscular men were probably replaying the moment in their heads, trying to justify it, trying to reframe it, trying to protect their pride, but outside, perspective felt clearer. "Professor," Jose Daniel said suddenly, "would you mind looking at something for me sometime? Maybe Helping me refine my training? The older man smiled warmly. I'd be honored. Damaris glanced between them. You two make a good team. The older man shook his head gently. No, he said. We make a good generation. Jose Daniel looked confused. Strength without wisdom is incomplete, the older man explained. Wisdom without strength is unused potential. Together, they're powerful. The streetlight flickered on above them. Evening had settled. Damaris turned to Jose Daniel. So, she said lightly, about that date. He smiled for the first time that day without restraint. I'd like that. She nodded. But before they parted ways, the older man added one final thought. Remember this, he said calmly. Muscles fade, youth fades, applause fades. He paused. But discipline compounds. He gave them both a steady look, and humility always elevates. Then he walked down the sidewalk at an unhurried pace. Not triumphant, not celebrated, just steady. Back inside the gym, the loudest men in the room were probably still strong, but outside, two people had just witnessed something stronger. And sometimes, the greatest lesson isn't about lifting weight. It's about lifting your perspective,